Before the world knew his name, there was a quiet moment. A young man stood at the edge of something bigger than himself, carrying the weight of a neighborhood, a family, and a future that refused to wait. The room was small. The night was heavy. And his voice, deep and unmistakable, felt like it was about to shake the walls. He came from Brooklyn, but not the version people see in postcards. He came from Canarsie, where survival is learned early and dreams are fragile things. From the outside, his rise looked sudden. One hit. One sound. One voice that seemed to come out of nowhere. But nothing about his story was accidental. Pop Smoke did not appear overnight. He was shaped by loss, pressure, and choices that carried real consequences. He understood what it meant to want more, not just money or fame, but escape. Escape from cycles that had swallowed too many before him. At just 20 years old, he became the sound of a city searching for its next identity. His music felt dangerous and beautiful at the same time. It made people feel seen. It made people feel powerful. And just when it seemed like the world was opening its doors to him, everything stopped. How does someone rise so fast, carry so much hope, and still lose everything in a single moment? And what does it mean when a voice that represented millions is silenced before its story is fully told? This is not just the story of a rapper. This is the beginning of Pop Smoke. He was born into a world that did not offer shortcuts. Before the music, before the fame, there was a small apartment in Canarsie, Brooklyn, where life moved with pressure and urgency. On July 20, 1999, Bashar Baraka Jackson entered a neighborhood where toughness was not a personality trait, but a requirement. Pop Smoke grew up surrounded by strong cultural roots and constant struggle. His mother, Audrey Jackson, carried the household with discipline and faith. She worked hard, demanded respect, and raised her son to be sharp and aware. His father, of Panamanian descent, was mostly absent after serving time in prison. Money was tight, but identity was not. Caribbean rhythms, Jamaican patois, Latin influence, and gospel music filled the home. Culture became armor. Canarsie was not gentle. Violence, gangs, and drugs were part of everyday scenery. Kids learned early who had power and who did not. Bashar saw friends get pulled into street life before they were old enough to understand the cost. He understood the rules without celebrating them. He watched. He listened. And he carried himself differently. From a young age, people noticed something about him. He was calm, confident, and unusually mature. He did not talk much, but when he spoke, it mattered. There was a quiet authority in the way he moved, like someone already thinking several steps ahead. He did not want to be trapped. He wanted out, not just for himself, but for his family. Basketball became that escape. It was his first real dream. He trained seriously, stayed focused, and showed enough promise to earn a scholarship to a Philadelphia prep school while still in 8th grade. For a kid from Canarsie, that opportunity meant everything. It was a door opening. A future forming. Then it closed without warning. Only a few months after arriving, Bashar was diagnosed with a heart condition that forced him to stop playing. No debate. No second chance. Basketball was over. The dream he had built his identity around disappeared overnight. He returned to Brooklyn changed. Quieter. Heavier. That loss mattered more than people realized. When a young man loses his one clear path forward, the streets are always waiting with alternatives. Bashar began spending more time outside. By his mid-teens, he became connected to gang culture, specifically the Crips. Not out of recklessness, but survival. In his world, affiliation meant protection, relevance, and respect. Still, he never lost control of himself. Friends described him as calculated, observant, and disciplined. He was not impulsive. He carried himself like someone who understood consequences. Even then, there was leadership in him. People followed his energy. Music was always nearby, but it was not yet the plan. He absorbed rhythm naturally, surrounded by reggae, dancehall, and gospel. He felt sound before he understood direction. At 16 and 17, he played around in studios with friends. Nothing serious. Just curiosity. But the foundation had already been laid. The environment. The loss. The pressure. The hunger. All of it was quietly shaping something powerful. This was not the rise yet. This was the storm gathering. The shift did not come with a plan. It came with a feeling. Around 2018, Bashar was still figuring himself out. Music was not yet a mission. It was something he touched when the moment felt right. He spent time in small studios with friends, listening more than talking, absorbing sounds without forcing direction. Then one night, almost by accident, everything changed. A beat started playing in the room. It was not a New York beat. It came from the UK drill scene, dark, cold, and aggressive. The production felt like tension in motion. When Bashar stepped to the mic and spoke over it, something clicked instantly. His voice did not sit on the beat. It cut through it. Deep. Gritty. Commanding. The room went quiet. Everyone felt it. That moment became the foundation of "Welcome to the Party." Pop Smoke did not sound like anyone else in New York. The combination was unfamiliar but undeniable. UK drill energy mixed with Brooklyn's slang, street confidence, and a voice that sounded twice his age. The track started moving through the neighborhood before it ever touched the internet. Cars blasted it. DJs played it at block parties. People stopped to ask the same question. Who is this? In April 2019, the video dropped on YouTube. It was raw and unpolished. Shot in Brooklyn. No luxury. No effects. Just presence. A black hoodie. Focused eyes. Energy that felt dangerous and alive. Within weeks, the song exploded. Not because of marketing. Because it felt real. New York recognized itself in the sound. That was when the name stuck. Pop Smoke. A name built from childhood nicknames, street identity, and instinct. And suddenly, the city had a new voice. The momentum did not slow. In July 2019, Pop Smoke released his debut mixtape, Meet the Woo. It was short, direct, and unapologetic. Tracks like Dior and PTSD were not just music. They were declarations. Dior became an anthem. The beat was hypnotic. The hook unforgettable. The song moved from house parties to NBA arenas. It crossed boundaries without losing its edge. What Pop created was more than hits. He carved out a sound. Brooklyn drill. A style rooted in UK drill production but reshaped through New York attitude and street experience. It felt familiar and brand new at the same time. His presence grew fast. He moved with confidence but never rushed his words. Interviews were calm. Measured. He spoke only when necessary. That restraint made people listen harder. Fashion followed naturally. Designer fits. Dior references. A balance of grit and elegance that made him stand out. Behind the scenes, the industry took notice. Pop Smoke signed with Victor Worldwide, gaining structure without losing control. In early 2020, he released Meet the Woo 2. The sound was sharper. The vision clearer. Bigger features arrived, but his voice remained the center. He was no longer just rising. He was leading. People started making comparisons. The voice. The presence. The weight on every track. Even legends took notice. For a moment, it felt like New York had found its next torchbearer. And Pop Smoke was just getting started. By early 2020, everything was moving fast. Too fast. Pop Smoke was no longer just a rising artist from Brooklyn. He was becoming a global name. Tours, fashion weeks, industry meetings, studio sessions across cities. The pressure was constant. The expectations were heavy. And like many young artists who rise suddenly, he needed distance. Space to think. Time to breathe. That was why he went to Los Angeles. In February 2020, Pop Smoke traveled to the West Coast with a small group of friends. They rented a luxury home in the Hollywood Hills. Quiet. Elevated. Far from the noise of New York. Palm trees. Glass walls. A pool overlooking the city. It was supposed to be a place of rest and focus. Somewhere safe. It was not. In the early hours of February 18th, just after 4 a.m., 4 intruders broke into the house. They were young, armed, masked, and they were not there by accident. This was a targeted robbery. Hours earlier, Pop Smoke and a friend had posted photos and videos on Instagram. They were showing designer gifts and bags. In one short clip, a shopping bag briefly revealed the address of the house. It was a small detail. Easy to miss. But someone was watching closely. According to investigators, that post led the suspects directly to the location. They entered through a second-story balcony. Inside the house, Pop Smoke was in the shower. Reports say he was unarmed. When he realized what was happening, he tried to fight back. There was a struggle. Then gunshots. He was hit multiple times. Paramedics rushed him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but it was too late. Pop Smoke was pronounced dead that morning. He was 20 years old. The shock was immediate. News spread across New York, Los Angeles, and the entire hip-hop world. Disbelief followed grief. How could someone with so much momentum, so much promise, be gone so suddenly? He had made it out. He was focused. He was building. And still, he was vulnerable. As more details emerged, the story became even harder to process. The suspects were teenagers. One of them, just 15 years old, was identified as the shooter. They stole almost nothing. A watch later sold for a few $1,000s. A life taken for almost nothing at all. The senselessness was overwhelming. Pop Smoke had survived the dangers of Canarsie, only to be killed in a quiet luxury home thousands of miles away. His death became a painful reminder of how thin the line is between fame and exposure. How social media, designed to celebrate success, can also invite danger. The streets mourned. Fans gathered in Brooklyn, lighting candles, playing his music, standing together in silence. Artists spoke out. The city felt like it had lost one of its own. Not just a rapper, but a symbol of what was possible. This was not just a tragedy. It was a warning. And it left a question that still lingers. What happens when a voice meant to carry a generation is taken before it can finish the sentence? The reaction was immediate, and it was global. When news broke that Pop Smoke had been killed, it did not feel like just another headline. It felt personal. In New York, the loss hit like a punch to the chest. Brooklyn, especially Canarsie, went quiet in a way that only happens when a neighborhood loses one of its own. In America, the hip-hop community responded with disbelief and grief. Artists, producers, athletes, and fans all said the same thing in different ways. This was not supposed to happen. He was too young, too focused, too important to the future of the sound. Tributes poured in from across the industry. Not just words, but emotion. Anger. Confusion. Regret. But the response went beyond music. Major media outlets began asking deeper questions. How could a rising artist be so exposed? What role did social media play? In an era where visibility equals success, Pop Smoke's death became a warning about how quickly that visibility can turn dangerous. One post. One detail. One mistake. And everything changes. Internationally, the shock was just as strong. In the UK, where drill music had influenced his sound, fans felt a connection to his artistry. European audiences who had embraced his music saw him as a bridge between scenes, a rare artist who carried authenticity across borders. From London to Paris, his name was spoken with the same disbelief. In New York, the mourning was physical. Candlelight vigils filled the streets. His music echoed from cars and storefronts. Murals appeared on brick walls. A corner in Canarsie was later renamed in his honor, turning geography into memory. These were not gestures for a celebrity. They were acts of love for someone who had carried the city's voice. Pop Smoke's death also reopened conversations America has struggled with for decades. Youth violence. Poverty. Access. the dangers faced by young black men even after they make it out. His story reminded people that success does not erase vulnerability. In some ways, it magnifies it. What made the loss cut even deeper was the sense of unfinished business. He was not at the end of his story. He was at the beginning of something larger. And the world knew it. America mourned him as a fallen star. The world mourned him as a voice that arrived just in time and left far too soon. When he was gone, the silence felt unreal. 20 years was all he had. And yet, in that short time, Pop Smoke left something that refused to fade. After his death, many believed the story would end in mourning. Instead, it transformed into proof of how powerful his presence had already become. In the months that followed, his family and closest collaborators worked carefully to finish what he had started. They did not rush it. They treated his voice with respect, understanding that what remained was not just music, but legacy. In July 2020, Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon was released. The title alone felt prophetic. The album debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and stayed there. It was not driven by sympathy. It was driven by quality. The world heard what Pop Smoke was becoming. Not just a drill artist. Not just a street voice. But a complete star. Songs like For the Night, Mood Swings, and What You Know About Love revealed range many had not yet seen. He could be melodic, vulnerable, smooth, and still carry the same weight that made his earlier music feel dangerous and alive. The album became one of the longest-running number 1 hip-hop projects of the decade. It proved something important. Pop Smoke was not a moment. He was direction. His influence moved beyond music. Fashion followed his lead. Dior, once just a lyric, became a symbol. Young fans around the world wore the name with pride, even if they never owned the brand. He had turned aspiration into identity. Brooklyn drill expanded rapidly, with new artists building on the blueprint he created. Many of them said the same thing. There was no wave before him. Back home, his presence never left. Murals covered brick walls in Canarsie. His name became part of the neighborhood's language. A street corner was renamed in his honor. Not as a tourist attraction, but as remembrance. He had given the city something to believe in again. Perhaps the most powerful part of his legacy lives with his family. His mother, Audrey Jackson, chose purpose over silence. She spoke openly about gun violence, about protecting young lives, about making sure other mothers would not have to feel the same pain. Through her, his story became a lesson, not just a loss. Pop Smoke once said, "You're not living unless you're dreaming." He lived that truth. He dreamed past his circumstances, past his environment, past expectations placed on him before he ever had a choice. And even though his life was tragically short, his impact was not. He changed the sound of a city. He gave voice to people who rarely feel heard. And he reminded the world that greatness does not need time, only truth. If this story made you think of someone who never got enough time, share their name. And if Pop Smoke's journey meant something to you, his voice is still playing. All you have to do is listen. Vi.